Good morning, everybody. We'll get this meeting started. The Metro Inner Development Assessment Panel this morning. Declare the meeting open at 9:32 and acknowledge that we're hosting this meeting on the traditional land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation. We acknowledge the Aboriginal people as the traditional custodians of Western Australia. Pay respect to elders past and present and the ongoing connection between people, land, waters and community. The meeting will be run in accordance with the DAP Standing Orders and DAP Regulations 2011. This meeting is being recorded and live streamed on the DAP website. Panel members may refer to technical devices throughout the meeting to assist them in considering the information before them. My name is Clayton Hyam and I am the presiding member for this morning's meeting. With me I have Karen Hyde, the deputy presiding member, Andrew Howe, the third specialist member, and online we have Mayor Patrick Hall and Councillor Ben Kunze from the City of Canning. Welcome to you all. Item 2, no apologies, and minutes from previous meetings are available on the DAP website. Part B, Item 1, Declaration of Due Consideration. Can panel members, by show of hands, indicate that they have or they're familiar with all the information contained in Part B and the Part B related information, please, and the R13 direction. Thank you. Disclosures of interest. I have a disclosure of interest from Councillor Ben Kunze, an impartiality interest, which is detailed, will be detailed in the minutes, but the disclosure is the council previously considered an item in 2020 which involved a request from the owner of 149 to 151 Riveted Drive, Rossmoyne, to remove 13 lemon and gum trees adjacent to 147, 149 and 151 Riveted Drive, Rossmoyne. And I've agreed that Councillor Kunze can sit on that item, which is in fact the next item. Are there any other disclosures of interest? No. Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, as I always do, the Form 1 does not provide sufficient information for me to confidently declare that I do not have an interest to disclose. We don't even know who the owner of the property is. We've got a proprietary limited there, but no trading name. I don't know who the directors of those companies are, and I don't know whether or not I have a relationship with any of those people. So I don't feel that I or anyone is really in a position to confidently declare that they do not have an interest. I just wanted to put that on the record.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I think we're probably all in that position, but I do acknowledge what you have said. Did this matter go to a briefing session? The item we're dealing with first?
No, it did not.
No, okay, thank you. All right, if that's the case, we'll move on to the item in Wharf Street, Queen's Park, which is 16 multiple dwellings. We have a presenter, Mr. Malcolm Mackay, online, and where is Malcolm? Is he there?
Yes, I should be here.
Thank you. Malcolm, you know the drill. You've got 3 minutes, and following that time, we may, or panel members may want to ask you some questions. So over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Good morning, and good morning, members. I trust that you have read my written submission, as there was no way I could have covered it all in 3 minutes. In summary, this is a good design. It's broadly supported by the city's DRP that provides 16 affordable dwellings within a short walk to a railway station, something that is particularly important during a housing crisis and also now that we stand at the precipice of an energy crisis. However, the Queen's Park Station structure plan is fundamentally flawed, and in the context of high construction prices effectively discourages the form of development it sought, with no opportunities for a plan B in the form of grouped housing. The failings of the local planning framework have been exacerbated by the city's tick-the-box approach to statutory planning and novel interpretations of the R codes. The JDAP system was specifically set up to enable logical planning decisions by experts when logical planning assessment and decision-making in local government breaks down. This is a prime example where the JDAP needs to exercise its discretion and approve what is a good quality and much needed residential development within walking distance of a railway station at a time when there is such a pressing need for it. Apart from being a shortcut to a drawn-out SAT process, deferral will delay development, and given that construction prices are likely to accelerate again on the back of the current fuel prices, there may well accelerate out of the window of opportunity to viably deliver this much-needed housing. For this reason alone, time is of the essence. As for the proposed conditions of approval, they appear to be generally standard and we have no objections. However, for condition number 4, the application of cash in lieu, I would suggest is questionable given that technically there is no parking shortfall, but I will leave you to ponder that one because you guys are the experts. Otherwise, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mackay. Questions from panel members? Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation and your written documentation, Malcolm. Just thinking around the bin store. Strange how sometimes these things always come down to waste management, but nonetheless, it appears to be quite a big space. Any thoughts on why the bin store is so big and whether it could be less big, or had you looked at other locations, or the applicant looked at other locations for it, and how you came to the conclusion that this was the best spot?
Yeah, happy to answer that one. Yes, we did look at other locations. In fact, the initial design that we came up with had the bin store further towards the back of the property, and it was designed in such a way to allow bin trucks to come in, turn around, and go out again. However, through discussion with the city's engineers and with the tacit endorsement of the planning officers and the DRP, we came up with an alternative arrangement, which is the current one, which moves the bin store halfway down the property adjacent to that sort of central courtyard area, and enables a bin truck to come in and or to reverse in and to come back out again, which was a significant concession on the part of the city, because otherwise the site would have been effectively undevelopable if you had to bring a truck in, turn it around, and get it back out again. So that was a really good initiative on the part of the city. As for the sizing of the bin store, it's based on the WALGA guidelines, so it is what it is. It's consistent with the guidelines. I can't see any way of making it smaller.
Okay, thank you. Is it fully enclosed?
The bin store is fully enclosed, yes.
Okay, because the only reason I'm asking, and I'm not trying to catch you out here, but it does say in the waste management report that it's open to the air and therefore easily ventilated, which seems a bit strange given where it is located. So perhaps the waste management plan is somewhat out of date. It does have some different plans in it. Did you have a comment on that? Yeah,
it is fully enclosed. The top of the wall, between the top of the wall and the roof, there are louvers, which allows for some trickle ventilation to ventilate the space, which is sort of standard best practice.
Okay, thank you. Is there a caretaker? The waste management plan also refers to a caretaker. Presumably these are for rent or lease. Is there a caretaker as far as you're aware?
I'm not sure of the management arrangements. That's one's kind of up to the client. But typically for a development of this size, there would be a manager in charge of the apartments, and I think that's will be particularly true in this case because the owner is looking at running it as a build-to-rent development for the foreseeable future. So I think it's reasonably safe to assume that yes, there will be a caretaker. Okay. They may not live on site, but there will be a caretaker.
Okay, thank you. And to the rear of Unit 9 and Unit 3, you have on plan a 1.8 metre brick fence adjacent to the courtyards, which sort of narrows that space. And then beyond that, you've got quite a bit of space around the bin store. What was the thinking around needing the 1.8 brick fence there, and any opportunities to modify that to give a little bit more space to those units and their outdoor area?
As far as the fencing, that's something that may have got lost in translation. Certainly my guidance to the applicant was to have a visually permeable fence.
Yes.
That it was solid up to about 900 mil.
Yeah.
And then with panels above, visually permeable panels above that, within piers, that would certainly be the preferred outcome.
Yeah.
As for the question of whether those outdoor living areas were kind of L-shaped and then sort of butted up to the bin store, we did have a think about that. The preference was to keep those areas of landscape adjacent to the bin stores within the common realm,
Right.
where they would most likely have a better chance of being well maintained than if they were in the tenant's own area.
Okay, thank you for that. And my last question, if I may.
Sure.
You've got 16 units, you've got 32 parking bays for residents, which according to the RAR is an oversupply of 16 parking bays. Just wondered what the rationale was behind that, given it's 360 metres from a train station, as you indicated, well within walkable distance of a number of things. So what's the logic behind the oversupply?
I think that might be a mistake in the RAR. To the best of my knowledge, there are 19 bays, including
19.
the on-street bay. So it's
Okay.
essentially one bay per apartment, plus a couple of visitor bays.
Okay, that's lovely. I will refer some questions to the city for points of clarification. Thank you. That was all I had.
Thank you, Member Hyde. Further questions from panel members? Member Howe?
Malcolm, can you just talk us through a lot of these issues stem from the R coding that this development is assessed against, whether it's sort of R40 or R80. Could you give me just a 2-minute summary on why you think the council has erred in selecting R40 as opposed to R80?
Yeah, I could collaborate on that. Obviously, I'd cover that in my written submission. However, the waters have been muddied over the last decade or so by the constant changing to the R codes. If we go back to the original meaning of the R codes, R80 effectively meant 80 dwellings per net hectare. This development sits at 79.5 dwellings per net hectare. So it is effectively what we used to consider R80. The current R codes really they obfuscate the issue, and they make reference to minimum lot areas, which have little relevance to the original coding, and they also refer to plot ratio, which is completely independent of dwellings per hectare, because it really depends on unit size. So there is an element of just plucking a number out of the air. The issue that we had on this one is that the number that the city plucked out of the air was 40 rather than 80. And at 40, it comes with much stricter guidelines around privacy provisions, because the assumption that at R40, you're in lower density areas where a resident next to amenity is more of a consideration. So the irony in all of this is that we've been stung with the privacy provisions of R40 when we're developing effectively at 80 dwellings per hectare. And had we designed it according to the current framework in the R codes for R80, the privacy provisions, it would be a different set of privacy provisions that applied, and the whole privacy issue would have disappeared. So it's a bit messy, but the effect is it's making a good design and delivering housing much harder than it would elsewhere in the metropolitan area.
Thank you.
The questions from panel members? Yes, Mayor Hall.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd just like to, through the Chair, politely and respectfully say to Mr McKay that I don't appreciate him speaking in that manner about our staff. These are professional planning staff, and I don't think that anyone has simply plucked a number out of the air. He aired that twice. I don't appreciate it. I would appreciate Mr Donaghy having the opportunity to respond to Mr McKay's assertion about zoning and also the fact that staff simply plucked a number out of the air.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Is there a question that you have though?
Yes, I'd like through the chair to ask Mr Donaghy whether he accepts or doesn't accept the assertion that the city's planning staff have simply plucked a number out of the air.
We'll get to the staff in a minute, but I'm just seeking questions of Malcolm Mackay at the moment. Councillor Kunza.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I just wanted to ask, with respect to the second condition or the second point, and you've made comments in your paragraph 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12, with respect to the R codes and whether 16 two-bedroom apartments should be permitted or not, is your commentary, are you disappointed with how the city's interpreted the R codes, or are you disappointed with what the R codes stipulate?
To be honest, it's probably a combination of the two. I think that I'm on record of saying that the R codes are flawed, and they're certainly not a manual for good design. And I do note that they are currently being reviewed. However, I think this situation has been exacerbated by the city's approach of taking the R codes as effectively as gospel. They're effectively a set of guidelines. There is discretion to interpret them, and the city's approach has been generally to just sort of to read what has written, and with the exception of the operation of the waste management, has really offered no flexibility in that interpretation. Which, as someone who works throughout most of the local governments in the Perth metropolitan area, my experience is that local governments are generally far more flexible in their interpretation, particularly when there's a pressing need to deliver housing. Look, there is a level of disappointment with the City of Canning that discretion, flexibility, and common sense just simply has been missing.
Further questions of yes, Councillor Kunza.
Yeah, just following up to that. If the panel was to agree with you and approve the 16 two-bedroom apartments, how would the city ever seek to pursue one-bedroom options with future developments? If they allow a position where there's no diversity within a development such as this, how could they ever then subsequently try to enforce it on other ones? Your argument is that there's a lack of diversity within the area, and providing more two-bedroom apartments against the 3- and 4-bedroom apartments in itself is diversity. But how would the city ever get one-bedroom apartments in the future?
The delivery of housing product is very much related to market conditions. And look, I've been involved in this game for decades, and I have seen the apartment market swing from owner-occupiers looking for three-bedroom apartments to investor stock looking at one-bedders and everything in between. It constantly changes, and it's different for every place as well. So what works in Cottesloe is completely meaningless for what works in Queen's Park. So it very much is horses for courses. As far as on-site diversity is concerned, whilst yes, it's desirable, it actually becomes more of an issue on larger developments. When you've got someone like Finbar who are sort of turning out 250 apartments at a time, providing that diversity is more important, but more importantly, the economics of a 250 apartment development mean that you can use the 3-bed apartments and the 4-bed apartments to subsidise the 1-bed apartments. You've got that flexibility. On a project of this scale, where you only have 16 apartments, you really have to, every apartment has to turn a profit. Otherwise, the development doesn't happen, and that's the fundamental difference. And the R codes doesn't adequately distinguish between the scales of project and the ability to deliver diversity.
Further questions? Okay, thank you for that. Just before we go to the staff, I want to partially echo Mayor Hall's comments. I think it behoves us to, in making submissions, to be respectful of the staff and to do it in a professional way. And I think some of the commentary perhaps hasn't adhered to that. So I would hope in the future that we can be a little bit more professional in our approach to that. So going over to the staff, we've got is there Adam Stilitano, Austin Donaghy, and Brett Woodgush with us. Gents, rather than doing a total presentation on the project, because we've read it all, you might want to respond firstly to Mayor Hall's question, and then we might go to questions from other members of the panel. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you, presiding member. Just probably to address Mayor Hall's question first, and then I'll pass over to our DRP chair to run through the DRP process that happened, and then I'll answer any planning related inquiries. In terms of the assessment itself, the applicants did come to the city, I believe it was back in June 2025, for some pre-lodgement advice. At this stage, at the very start of the process, based on the plans that were submitted, the city did state that it would be an R40 development based on the number of apartments provided and the site area itself. I'm sure the panel and the applicant is well aware that we have essentially 3 separate planning codes: Part B, Part C, and Volume 2, the apartment codes. Apartments can be constructed under all 3 of these apartment codes, and they have different assessment criteria. Based on the number of apartments proposed, it met the site area requirements for R40 under the R codes, and that's why we had to then assess the application under Part C. To reference the applicant's statement on the Queen's Park structure plan itself, this is located within the residential frame and provides a range of density to enable apartments to be constructed at R40, R60 and R80. It's ultimately dependent on what the applicant proposes on site and the density. As we are aware, R80 requires assessment against plot ratio and not site area, where R40 requires an assessment based on site area and not plot ratio. So the city has been quite clear and concise from the very start of this application that it would be assessed under the R40 provisions of the R codes. In relation to the apartment mix or the dwelling mix, as stated as well within the RAR, the city doesn't agree with the applicant's assertion that the structure plan hasn't been successful in obtaining apartments under the current framework itself. Indeed, the DAP 2 months ago approved an apartments or a mixed-use development on 7 Oak Street in Cannington for 36 multiple dwellings, which was able to provide that apartment mix in accordance with the R codes. Indeed, the city has just received an application, a DAP application at 178 Railway Parade, again within the structure plan area. This is for 111 multiple dwellings, and again, this achieves the dwelling mix proposed. Both of these applications were lodged without the city requiring a dwelling mix. So the city again doesn't agree with the applicant's assertion that the economies don't allow for dwelling mix within multiple dwellings themselves. Indeed, the city has a standard development application at the minute for 16 apartments on 185 George Street, which is immediately behind the subject site and also within the residential frame. This application is for 16 apartments, and again, this provides the dwelling mix in accordance with the R codes. So from the city's perspective, and what we're seeing with developments coming through, the dwelling mix can be achieved under the current economics and development constraints. I'll pass over to Brett now just to probably go through the DRP's assessment of the process itself, and then I'm happy to answer any questions relating to the RAR. Brett?
Thanks very much. Does Mayor Hall want to ask a question? No. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to the panel. I appreciate the questions that have been asked of the applicant and also your defence of the reputation of the professionals. I think that's essential in this circumstance. I'd like to start off there by outlining respectfully that I represent the chair. I am the chair of the panel. I have worked in Australia and overseas in architects' offices and have a degree in architecture, but I do not represent myself to be an architect. In that regard, I'm the same in terms of my education as my practice as Mr. Mackay, who also cannot represent himself as an architect in Western Australia. The next point I'd like to make is that there's a very diverse range of expertise on the panel. There's some questions about which members of the panel can comment on any of the subject matter. So I'll briefly go through the panel and who they are. First of all, Mr. Tony Blackwell, who's a very experienced landscape architect, and all of us who have worked in our profession know that landscape architects deal with a lot of the issues that architects deal with and have exceptional knowledge of the issues of climate, access to light, and how you manage those things, both in terms of designing for plants and also for humans. We also have on the panel Gordon and Simic, a planner. I know none of the members on the panel have worked for large planning practices, and in those roles and in other roles have had to show exceptional knowledge of designing dwellings for solar access and writing guidelines and doing subdivision design. To be told that I can't comment on solar design would be quite surprising. Gordon Simic also has a Masters of Urban Design, as do I. She's also a planner, and I'm also a planner, member of the Fellow of the Institute of Architects. And finally, we have two architects on the panel who are both registered in Western Australia and entitled to call themselves architects. One of them is Simon Venturi, who is on a number of panels as a reviewed over about 300 applications. So I think the standing of the panel is exceptional. I'd like to say across the entire process, the panel has been very uniform in their points, very much in agreement on their points, except for one, which I'll come back to later. And we've been consistent through the whole way through the deputation. We have endeavoured as much as we can to put aside a number of our comments that we'd usually expect an applicant to respond to in support of this application on the basis that Mr. Mackay, the applicant, is saying it's a more affordable process. But it does challenge us. We are usually presented, as the panel knows, on these large deep sites with quite an impressive response to the site. To zone these sorts of sites and upcode them would potentially be difficult, would appear to create a challenge in terms of design, because you really want to see sites amalgamated. However, the profession has come back with a model where they basically run the units down the length of the block, and particularly in Canning, where the lots are intercardinal, produce a run of developments where each gets really good access, morning access mostly, to northern light in winter, and excellent sea breeze and ventilation in the morning. So we have a very good outcome. Some have presented a form that are not particularly great at the beginning, but we usually get that they're very supportive. When this model came in, Mr. Mackay said it's affordable. We recognise that putting the parking at the back of the lot rather than under the building could potentially be more affordable. And so we've leant over backwards to try and support it. Recognising right from the outset that half the units face mostly south and will never get sunlight, very difficult to get sunlight, and the ones that face north that could get sunlight have not been designed in a way that they can get sunlight. So we indicated to the applicant right at the very first DRP that we support this model, but we need to see the floor plans change around to enable a proper response to the R codes. Now, some might say, well, we can put aside climate change and those sorts of things. When you look at the additional requirements in the National Construction Code that keep getting added in, it's obvious that the government places extreme, and the community places extreme importance on this aspect of design. We also suggested that he should bring in a landscape architect to provide that professional expertise that's not been brought in. We suggested they brought in a planner to assist them on the planning interpretation that's not been brought in, and we don't see any master of design. We also have seen not the best of Mr. Mackay in terms of using his design, his skills, because we haven't seen any evolution of the plan at all. The plan that we saw the very first DRP is effectively the plan we saw today, which is really quite surprising into design reviews today. So where I don't agree with the panel is the rest of the panel has said it's outrightly refused this. Let's give it a wall of red. It has not achieved the objectives. I have said I insist that we, as much as I can insist, that we take this forward, but reiterate that we'd like to see it come back, to see some effort put into designing the floor so there's some access to sunlight and some of the other issues that delivered. So there, I have to say I respect Mr. Mackay's views on many things, but I think he's overextended in terms of saying he has the DLP support. And I would like to see this come back. The DLP has agreed that it can be a chair-only review, so we expedite the process. And I don't see any reason why it couldn't be done very quickly. So thank you once again, Mrs. Hind. Your questions about the store are very interested. We were also interested in the garden turning around and going back to the store, or the store being smaller or being somewhere else. But the only alternative was car bays in the courtyard. So we've been left with that bin store in the R line of those developments. But still, we showed support where we can. Thank you.
Thank you for that. We'll go to questions of the officers and Mr. Woodgush. Panel members, do you have questions? Yes, Member Hyde.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction and briefing from Austin and Brett. Just in terms of the waste management plan, the technical document, the appendix, was it the city's view, and in light of the R13, that might need to be updated? I note that the conditions in the R13 suggest that those recommendations are adopted, but I just wondered if it was as up to date as it might be, or reflecting those matters which engineering services had highlighted in their referral.
Thank you for the question. So the waste management plan, in terms of the dimension, size, and everything else in regards to the bin store, is all up to date. It's just the location that's been modified based on the latest set of plans. So cities have a view that a large part of the waste management plan is at a stage where it could be supported. However, there may be a need to amend the waste management plan to update those plans in accordance with the approved plans, should the DAP be of a view to support that R13.
Okay, so in that respect, would you suggest that there does need to be some suggestion of an updated plan being submitted to the city in the conditions as they're presented in the R13?
Yes, I agree. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, my second question, and I may have misread the RAR, and I'm happy to be corrected. Could you just comment on the supply of parking, please? Because I think, again, I might have misread that there was an oversupply, but are you suggesting that there's an undersupply of residence parking, or it's just right?
Thank you for the question. So to clarify the wrong in the city's parking assessment, there is an oversupply in terms of the minimum number of bays required for residents on site. So the minimum requirement is for 0 bays on site.
Yes.
0 bays
Yes.
There is a maximum of 32. So the city's assessment is basically demonstrating resident bays are an oversupply, visitor bays is a shortfall. Okay,
so the Malcolm was saying there are 19 bays. You concur with that? So they're under the maximum, but obviously over the minimum.
Yeah, sorry. So just to clarify, so there's 18 bays provided on site. There's an additional bay that Malcolm refers to in the verge, which the city doesn't support.
Okay, all right, lovely. Thank you for that clarification. Then again, just seeking your comment on an earlier question that I asked Malcolm around that brick fencing that's shown on the plans, at least to units 9 and 3, but there may be other locations where a solid brick fencing to 1.8 is shown. Malcolm had suggested that his recommendation was for more of an R code compliant permeable above sort of knee height. How does the city view that? And if that was an outcome that the city preferred other than what's shown on the plans, how would that be managed through condition setting, please?
Essentially, the 1.8 high brick fence was actually proposed by the applicant and not the city.
No, I understand that,
Yeah.
Austin. Sorry, I'm saying I've read that on the plans, but
Yeah.
then there was a comment from Malcolm earlier that that was not his recommendation, but it's still on the plans. But so I'm asking, what would the city's preference be if not 1.8 solid brick? I mean, how have you approached that issue, and what would your recommendation for condition setting be? Are you happy to accept a 1.8 solid brick fence, or would you wish to see something that is a bit more permeable in certain locations?
Well, I presume the applicants have provided it to hide the bin store that's less than 2 meters away. That's the premise for the solid fence in the first place. If the DAP were minded to provide a visually permeable fence to view the bin store from their outdoor courtyard, then that could be done in accordance with the deemed to comply requirements of the R code. So a 1.2 solid and permeable above that.
Okay, my understanding is that the bin store is enclosed, is indeed fenced. Okay, I'll leave it there.
Further questions from panel members? Member Howe.
Brett, just quickly, thanks for your comments regarding the process that you went through with the DRP, and looking at your final submission, if you like, the DRP submission. The areas for review relate to landscape, and I noticed there is a landscape plan, and it does identify species and everything else. So where is the shortfall in your mind in that, given that there's obviously not a lot of site left to landscape thoroughly in that sense, but it seems to cover that?
Is Mr. Mackay still online, or has he left the room?
No further questions to Brett.
Sorry, that's fine. The reason I was responding was because the landscape architect has identified that the species really have no relationship to the location of the site and don't really suit the site, and picks up issues such as short-hole borer, the kinds of soil that they particularly like and doesn't think it's appropriate. In relation to the overall design, obviously we think there's a shortfall where the landscape architect could have done more. We suggested the bin store could have been designed to look like a clubhouse building, a little bit of an awning over the front of it, a little bit of a barbecue. All those things have been left out. We would like to see that right from the beginning. So it's not just species selection, but also assisting the designer to improve the overall outcome. But Mr. Blackwell is very assured that the species selection isn't appropriate and will properly developed.
And part of the conditions of the R13 would be that a landscape plan be lodged and be acceptable to council. So those things should be able to be resolved through condition.
Yeah, I believe so. I mean,
Okay.
I'm not essentially the stuff in terms of redesigning some of the building and dealing with the gap between the bin store, but in terms of species selection condition, yeah.
The second issue is around safety, and some of that talks to the bin store and the bicycles and things. And I think some of those things might be able to be resolved. But perhaps the third one, where you referred to requiring further amendment to the drawings, relates probably to solar access, I suppose. Most of those comments that yours refer to that. As you know, the cross-cardinal blocks, you and I dealt with a fair bit of that elsewhere. It is very, very difficult when we get into even single-level dwellings, let alone double-level dwellings. Mr. Mackay makes a comment about there's at least solar access at times of the day, because of the morning sun, to balconies and to side windows and things. Do you think that the level of solar access that is provided at the moment, albeit minimal in cases, is sufficient to refuse an entire development, or you can imagine the redesign would probably result in a completely different development?
Good questions. The intercardinal is actually working quite well in this area because of the typology that's been developed, which was a run of apartments with effectively balconies and bedrooms facing north. So we believe it is quite possible there's good design on these blocks. In this particular development, to your question about reconfiguration, as you know, if you refuse to concede on some areas or move things around, it's very hard to redesign. You actually need to move things around. I believe this is a very simple solution to at least the upper floor rooms, upper floor north-facing apartments. We've already considered whether to get up the south ones, which we should. There's not much way to notice it, but the north-facing ones, effectively, they push the bedroom so far forward that only some of the balcony gets light, and then the living room is pushed further back, and that affects the light access on the south-facing ones as well. It's also got the stores within the apartments. I believe if you took the stores and put them somewhere else, you could actually pull the bedrooms back and push the balconies forward and get light into that. That'd be one solution. So I actually don't believe, I think it's entirely in the kind of skill set to come back quite quickly with a design, but there seems to be a decision that we're not changing the design.
Thank you.
Further questions? Austin, I just want to query the wording of the reasons for deferral. You talk about compliance with design principles. Now, in my mind, compliance means yes or no. And it doesn't seem to allow for the degrees of discretion that can be exercised. What do you mean by compliance?
That's how it's worded in the R codes. The design principles development demonstrates compliance with the following design principles. So the city's just been consistent with the wording that's actually within the R codes themselves. Obviously, design principles by the very nature requires discretion. To add to Brett's point is we want apartments to be constructed here, but we want the best possible outcome. And so that's why we recommended deferral so that we can work with the applicant to get changes that Brett has suggested to enable this to be supported by the city itself. So to answer your question, we've considered the design principles and the discretion within the design principles, but at the planning level, we simply just can't support it at this stage because we think that there is a better outcome that can be achieved. And the applicant hasn't come to the table through the design review process or the pre-lodgement process to kind of make that happen. So instead of the city putting up an RER to refuse the application, we've put up a recommendation to defer it to try and work together with the applicant to try and get a better outcome for this application.
And in terms of diversity of housing, would that require a fair bit of redesign to achieve the number of single bed units?
The city doesn't think so. Obviously, they're providing 16 two-bedders. If they wanted to, they could remove a couple of the bedrooms on the lower floors, on the ground floor, for example, to provide greater outside space for the inhabitants itself, and also provide greater separation to the bin store, for example. As part of the city's RER, we have mentioned that there is overlooking as well from the upper floors in. So we don't think it's a good outcome, especially for those apartments that are facing south and looking towards a bin store, for example. Just to reference Brett's point and the application that the city currently has, which is directly behind the subject site of this RER, they've been able to design it to provide one large communal open space in the middle of the lot and provide parking underneath the building. So to Brett's point, it can work and it does work. It's just we're not seeing it in this application at this current stage.
Okay, thank you. Further questions of the staff? Yes,
yes, thank you. Just a brief one, just looking back at the RAR and the comments that have been made by the design review chair. I just want to be clear, in the RAR where you've got the assessment of some of the key issues that the DRP made, if I just take landscape as an example, some of the commentary given by the DRP suggests that refinement is needed, and that goes to member Howe's questions. And often that's not unusual. I think we would all agree that quite often landscape is a matter for design development and that can be adequately conditioned. But the officer's response is not supported. So I just want to be clear, is that not supported by the DRP, or the DRP suggesting that refinements need to be made, but on some counts that could be the subject of conditions? And the not supported is then the officer's review of the DRP advice and then recommendation in the RAR?
Thank you for the question. So I guess to answer the question about where it says not supported in the RAR, that is the officer's comment. Just to clarify that, that is the officer's comment from the city. In regards to the overall design review and the outcome of design review, in attachment 7, which is the final design review, you'll see the design review before minutes of the meeting. It's acknowledged in the forward portion that the proposal is not supported at this stage and requires further chair review. So that aligns with the city's comments. To go into the comments on the RAR in regards to landscape quality, sustainability and amenity, a lot of the commentary that we received from the DRP aligned with specific provisions within the RHOs that the city had found that the proposal couldn't be supported along the design's principles, which bears willing in that sort of assessment that the city provided. So that was the reason for the not support.
Okay, because actually I think it's attachment 7 that is attachment 10 rather, not attachment 7, which are the last DRP minutes. When I look at amenity, that got a green in DRP 3 and a green in DRP 4. But then when I go back to the RAR, whilst comments are raised, then the officer's view is not supported. So this gives me some need for clarification, really. I mean, perhaps it's a question for Brett, but it's confusing that there's 2 green lights there against amenity, but then your RAR is suggesting that's not supported. Could I have some comment on that, please?
I'll jump back in if I may. I think attachment 7, so attachment 10 should be the geotechnical.
Yeah, okay.
It should be attachment 7. I'm just having a look at item 3.2, and that attachment 10 is the final design review.
Yeah.
And it does have, so that's just for the following items. So just to clarify,
So amenities orange. Okay. I just want to be clear where the not supported is coming from, when we've got some sort of words from the DRP that sort of talk about you know, suggestions and things that could be achieved through conditions, but then we've got quite categorical not supported from the officers. So that's a advice over the top of other advice.
Correct. So it aligns with the outcome from the minutes, all those items that are pending further attention. But the comment is specifically from the officers.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. That was all.
Thank you. No further questions. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. We'll move to the item. There is a recommendation for deferral with a number of reasons. I'm going to seek a mover and a seconder for that recommendation. Mayor Hall moving. Seconder? Councillor Kunze. Thank you. Mayor Hall, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, look, I've heard everything that has been said today. I thank everyone for the questions and the answers they provided. But look, the panel is not compelled to deal with this matter today. There's no time imperative here forcing us to deal with the matter. And I think for me, the application should be dealt with when it is actually in a position that this panel can deal with it fully, because the conditions of the application, the design principles have essentially been met. Look, I was swayed by the reasons provided by the city staff in relation to the fact that a number of the design principles are deemed at this time not to be fully developed or not to be deemed to comply at this time. And I also take Mr. Donaghy's point which I think is an important point, that the city is not moving to refuse this application, simply to work with the applicant to bring it back to this panel in a condition that it can be dealt with fully without having been conditioned to the point that it would require to have this passed. And I would also note too that the deferral has been in the recommendation. The deferral is to a date that is agreeable by the applicant and also the city. So we will continue. The city is looking to work with the applicant, not to refuse the application. And I think that's important. I did take on the applicant spoke earlier and talked about in relation to housing diversity as one of the principles that in his view was probably being too strictly applied by the city of Canning. And he talked about horses for courses, and that, you know, perhaps in the city of Vincent, the leafy suburb of Vincent, one thing might apply and another thing might apply elsewhere. That elsewhere is here in the city of Canning. In Wharf Street itself, where this development is being built, we have a soup kitchen. In Wharf Street, where this is being built, the city of Canning provides free medical help to the underprivileged. This is the area that does require diverse housing stock. And I can't believe that profitability for this development should override the need for us as a panel to put in place and to uphold the design principles that are set to guide us. That was the argument being made, was about profitability, and that this development needs to stack up. I'm not sure that we should be driven or swayed by the argument that profitability should always mean that we disregard the basic design principles that we are required to apply. So on that basis, I wanted to support the recommendation simply to defer the matter until it can come back to us in a more mature form, that those design principles that at this stage the city is contending are not deemed to comply at this moment, and that the matter around diversity of housing should be addressed, and the other matters that have been raised around visual privacy, parking, solar access, that they should be addressed before the matter is finalised by this panel. And I do take the point about solar access, and I do note the question, which was a valid question, about the city's stance on solar and whether that would perhaps require a full redesign of this application. I think sometimes it's unfair to place the responsibility for the failings of architectural design on the city of Canning. They should be design principles that are taken into consideration by the applicant at the time of early design. And if they haven't been, that probably shouldn't be up to the city to answer questions about whether or not the city could be more flexible in that regard. And that is not the question that was asked, but I just think that the responsibility here for the condition of the and the state of the application, whether it is deemed to comply, sits and rests fully with the applicant and not with the city or this panel. I would hope for your support to defer the matter so that the city and the applicant can work on the application, bring it back to this panel, where I feel that at some point it may be supported. But at this point, I can't support it in its current form. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. Councillor Kunze.
Thank you, Chair. Just to begin with, I just want to touch on what you yourself and Mayor Hall have raised previously with respect to decorum and addressing the DAP. I must admit, from a council perspective, we've got measures within our standing orders when people make deputations. I was surprised when the actual submission came through and the way it was written and how it reflected on certain people, to the point where we've had our DRP chair come in to lay out all the qualifications of those who sit on the DRP. I note that the submission was subsequently changed to alter one paragraph. I'm not sure if that was on the submission, on the applicant's decision, or whether you as the chair or the DAP actually requested a change. But I wonder whether next time standing orders are amended by the state government, whether something can be included to deal with how this situation might be prevented in the future. The standing orders of the DAP speaks to the DAP members ourselves, and then also the decorum within the meeting. But for our chair to come in and have to defend the DRP, it was a bit disappointing, and I think it shouldn't be a situation that eventuates based on how a submission is written. So I'd like that to be taken into account. I just, in commenting on this actual motion, I agree with the city. I think the city has basically outlined why, or the officers have outlined why they think that the motion should be, or the recommendation should be for it to be deferred to deal with a number of issues that were raised. The applicant, as I asked through my question, is not only agreed with the R codes themselves and the deemed to comply requirements, but then the way the cities interpret it. Our city officers have just responded and pointed out that the market conditions do allow development with that diversity within the dwelling mix. And so, as the mayor stated, I don't think we should be making decisions on interpretation of the R codes based on current market conditions, when that argument, I don't actually know whether it would actually fit in this context. But I would agree with the city officers. I think we should defer it. Our city planning team is led by a director who always looks positively in the grey area. He always looks to resolve things. And I think the fact that they've recommended a deferral to resolve the issues instead of a flat out rejection is an example of how the city doesn't just look black and white, but they are looking at the grey area, and they're looking at an outcome that might actually see a positive outcome in the future. And that's why they're wanting to work with the applicant. And that's why I think we as a panel should accept that recommendation to defer.
Thank you, Councillor Kunze. Further speakers? Yes, Member Howe. Hyde, sorry.
Thank you. I think it is a difficult one. I do appreciate the comments made by the mover and the seconder, and obviously their very detailed local knowledge, and understand to some degree the city's frustration that things have not moved forward, or not been considered when advice has been given. However, I think, and I do acknowledge that what we're dealing with here is somewhat limited in terms of input by a landscape architect, and finessed by you know, in an architectural sense, we are dealing with a fairly standard offering here. I, however, would like to speak against the motion, because I do not believe that the reasons for refusal can actually adequately be responded to without going back to the drawing board completely and a fresh start. I also think that some matters, whilst emphasised in, for instance, reason 1, communal open space, can be dealt with through revisions to the landscape plan, and further consideration moving through that process with the city, who are obviously very keen to collaborate on this particular development in order to enable much needed housing. I think, you know, the matters of solar access for reason 3 do actually require a fundamental redesign, and therefore potentially might be a reason for refusal. However, then one needs to look at the condition within the development, and is the amount of solar access and the natural ventilation adequate? I look at some of the comments that the DRP has provided, and quoting directly, 2 apartment blocks are well designed for the context and diversity of the housing offering. The RAR talks that the subject site and locality are characterised by single-storey dwellings with a number of group dwellings which were constructed prior to the gazettal of the local structure plan. So if I look beyond the precise mix of this development, which at best might only provide a couple of alternate forms, and noting that this development is indeed required to provide at silver level, which has a level of adaptability in it, I see within the context of the neighbourhood that there is a mix. Now, none of us know how quickly that will transition. And there are certain restrictions that groups and single dwellings are not preferred within the structure plan, and that is taken as needing to provide multiple dwellings. So hence the bar is raised. Sure, there are some examples, but it's not as if we're open to development of whatever style between R40 and R80 in the frame for the station. So there is some narrowing of opportunity there by virtue of the structure plan. Whether solar and natural ventilation are optimised, well, the sustainability report says, notwithstanding the constraints of orientation, access to sunlight to habitable rooms and in particular outdoor living areas has been optimised. We therefore have some differences of opinion and degrees of judgment on that. I think it's a practical outcome for the orientation of the site and the typology that's being proposed here. There is certainly avoidance of single aspect apartments, and all apartments are capable of being cross-ventilated. The issue of parking shortfall, I think it is a small number. I thank the city for clarifying the supply of resident parking spaces. There is adequate for them. They're also within a walkable catchment where quite often we see there being a reduction of parking. And given that this is a build for rent, whether all of the parking is actually allocated to residents or whether all of the residents would choose to use that parking, I think there could still be a way forward with that through potentially a parking management plan. In terms of the visual privacy, again, we've heard about whether this should have been assessed at R40, R80. Obviously, it's been assessed at R40. However, other provisions at the higher coding do allow for different approaches to visual privacy, particularly for multiple dwellings. And it does become quite difficult to ensure that there is no overlooking into primary garden areas, especially where development goes above 1 story. And that can occur even in the lower coded areas below R40, never mind at this point. So for those reasons, presiding member, I don't find myself in a position to support the reasons for refusal. I note that we have an R13 to approve, which could be considered moving forward. So I'm not able to support the motion on the table at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Member Hyde. Member Howe.
Thank you, Chairman. I am also of the view that it's hard to support the current recommendation to defer this. It's at about 230 days, not 90, and there's obviously been a lot of backwards and forwards, and the DRP demonstrates that progress has been made on all aspects and is very close on a couple. And probably the last one that I think that the design review panel would like to see is essentially a redesign of the internal floor space, which, as Member Hyde said, is effectively a reason for refusal, not if you like, a deferral. Asking someone to redesign their whole building is quite a different outcome, I think, than just shuffling. I don't think it's just as simple as shuffling rooms around. I suspect it's not. I also appreciate the comment about dwelling diversity. This is an ongoing issue, and some areas are a lot worse than others. My guess, my assumption is that if there is a particular cohort which is using Queen Street at the moment, that there probably is single bedroom dwellings and that type of accommodation available. This one might be actually providing something that's slightly different. But at this particular time, which I think is going to be ongoing, removing bedrooms for the sake of meeting a policy seems to me to be counterintuitive. And I know that means that we might be locking some people out of a market, but it's also allowing a lot more people to actually have a bedroom. And I think that that is a consideration in this at this time. I'm also concerned about the reasons for the deferral. And I think our chairman, presiding member, raised the idea or raised the question about how one demonstrates compliance with the R codes, which could potentially hang the applicant out to dry a bit, because these things aren't necessarily 100% able to be complied with on all occasions, particularly when you have the nature of this type of lot and it being cross cardinal. It sits on a 45-degree angle. Achieving all of the ideals of and objectives of the R codes can be very, very hard to do. And therefore, I'm concerned that without a rewrite of all these reasons and putting all this back in, we might just be pushing the applicant back out to try and achieve something which may not be achievable. So that's my view on this at this stage.
Thank you. Look, I must say I've gone backwards and forwards in my mind on this one. There's no doubt it's a difficult site to develop given its orientation, and I suppose the fact that it's very narrow for its length, and that doesn't help in the way it should be designed, and it doesn't help the access to or solar access. I don't support the reasons for deferral. I'm quite satisfied with the proposed communal open space. I think that's an adequate space there, and I think it can work. I'll come back to the dwelling mix in a minute, but in terms of solar access, I agree with the previous two speakers that to alter this, and it probably applies to the dwelling mix as well, I think that's tantamount to a refusal. The alterations are going to be quite or sufficiently significant for it to really act as a refusal. In terms of on-site visitor parking, I think there is adequate parking given its location and distance from the station. And the visual privacy, if, as we've heard, if it was assessed as R80 and those visual privacy issues wouldn't exist. So I'm quite happy so I don't support the reasons for deferral. Going back to the dwelling mix, the comments that have been made, I support that the two-bedroom units in a build for rent, those two-bedroom units could in fact be equivalent to two single bed units where each room gets rented out. So it could be satisfying that other cohort that exists in the Queen's Park area. So I don't support the reasons for refusal or the deferral for that matter. So I'd be happy to, should this not be supported, I'm happy then to look at the R13 recommendation for approval. Back to you, Mayor Hall, as the mover.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just close quickly. Look, it's just difficult for me to understand why the officer's advice would be disregarded. and that we would allow developers to guide development rather than the design principles that I feel, I'm a layperson, I feel like I'm bound to uphold them. If the applicant is required to undertake some degree of redesign to achieve a better outcome, then that's a matter for the developer, not for the MIDAP. And I just think we're making a whole raft of assumptions. I did listen to the speakers. Thank you for your contribution, but you know, we're making a lot of assumptions here on behalf of the developer, on behalf of the city, around a whole manner of things. And I think particularly around the discussion around the possibility of the redesign and how much redesign may be required. I'm not certain that they are matters that we should be taking into account. And even if that was the case, surely the process of making amendments to building design is par for the course before the final design gets to the full construction site. We talk about a constrained site. Just for the record, I'm actually building a very large home in Wilson on the river at the moment on a site that's 8.3 metres wide. 8.3 metres wide, and I have been able, double-storey home, big home, and I've been able to comply with all of the design principles and requirements put on me. That design went through many iterations before we were able to arrive at a situation that all parties, including the city, of course, were happy that it was deemed to comply. This is just in my mind, and again, I'll say I'm not a planning professional. I'm a layperson. But surely the matter of redesign is something for the developer and not something that is unusual for a development of this size. Sure, it's come to us at this late stage for us to consider, but I think we're perhaps looking at each one of these reasons for the deferral in isolation rather than taking them as a collective. It seems that the deferral will be lost, but I think that's a really disappointing outcome for the city, which is, again, a city that has gone above and beyond to work with developers and also to comply with the statutory requirements. And it wasn't terribly long ago that also in Queen's Park, this JDAP, including Councillor Kunzer and I, supported a refusal of a site on the basis that it was underdeveloping. We are a council that is pragmatic, forward-looking, and doing all we can to support development. So we are not looking to refuse this, and I don't think that by asking the applicant to meet with the city to discuss some of the shortcomings, that should be reason for us to jump to the conclusion that there will be required to be a substantial and significant complete redesign of this. There is only lines on a page at this moment. There is nothing more tangible than lines on a page, and I can't understand why we wouldn't give the city just the opportunity to work with the applicant to see whether or not a solution can be found. I mean, isn't that our role to find a way? And the deferral gives both the applicant and the city a way forward. It's not a refusal. I can't accept that we are, by accepting this deferral today, by default, refusing the application. I think that's wrong. I think that makes far too many assumptions, and we don't have the evidence here to support those assumptions. Thank you, panel. I will be maintaining my support of the deferral for those reasons.
Thank you, Mayor Hall. I'll now put the motion. All in favour for deferral? Against? That's lost. Moving to the alternative recommendation for approval, which is in the R13. Is there a mover for the recommendation for approval? Thank you. Member Hyde, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Member Howe, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just briefly speak to this. I'm comfortable with the wording of this alternate that as the staff have prepared for us, and I thank them for that, There is sufficient within the various conditions to enable the city to liaise and to collaborate with the applicant and the applicant's team to make minor modifications and to finesse the development to allow this to proceed to development. There is a requirement for additional landscape. There is a requirement for clarification around materials and finishes. There is adequate recognition of engineering services comments on safety in terms of waste management. There are requirements to adhere to certain standards of lighting and security and visual privacy and universal design. It encapsulates the provisions and recommendations of the sustainability strategy which has been prepared and highlights a number of external advisory notes that the applicant must follow. So in that respect, I'm comfortable with this as an alternate to approve. I would suggest, however, an amendment, presiding member, to condition 23, which deals with the waste management. At the moment, that refers to a report that was prepared in 2025. So I wanted to insert the following words. Prior to the lodgement of a building permit, the waste management plan prepared by Tuscombe Subdivision Consultants Proprietary Limited, stamped 13th of August 2025, shall be updated in accordance with the approved plans, full stop. The revised waste management plan, and then continue with the wording in condition 23, which is shall be implemented, etc., etc.
Thank you. I'll seek a seconder for that. Member Howe, thank you. If you wish to say, speak any more on the amendment?
Only that it was acknowledged, I think, by both the applicant's representative and the officers that there was perhaps a lag between current plans and that waste management reporting. So it's just a question of updating that with sufficient detail.
Thank you, Member Howe. Do you wish to a seconder?
No, nothing more.
Any speakers on the amendment? No, I presume there's no wind up. So I'll put the amendment. All in favour? Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. Still with you, Member Hyde.
I'm happy to leave it there. I don't think I've had any, at this point, any other amendments others may have, but I'm comfortable with that there.
Thank you. Member Howe, the seconder.
I agree with Member Hyde. I think there's enough in the conditions that require the proponent to tidy up the loose ends and deal with some of those more technical matters that need further resolution. And I'm sure that the applicant will be able to meet those requirements. And enable is a very effective development to proceed.
Thank you. Further speakers on the recommendation for approval? No, I will support this. I agree with the mover, but I think this covers quite a number of those areas which are of concern and allows some work to be done by the applicant with the city officers to improve the development and go some way to satisfying those concerns that we've talked about before. So I'm happy to support this proposal. Back to no.
Happy to vote.
Okay, I'll put the recommendation for approval with conditions as amended. All in favour? Against? That's carried. Thank you very much. move on. Where am I? So, yes, we'll just bring the, we'll just get the presenters in for the next item. To presenters and gallery. We're moving to item 3.2, which is the Lot 33 Riverton Drive, Rossmoyne, multiple dwellings. Presenter is Cameron Leckie from Rise Urban, and Cameron, you have 3 minutes.
Thanks very much. Good morning and thanks for having us here. Just a quick introduction. I've also got Tony Goodser from ABN Group with us, who's technically the applicant, and I have the landowners and family here as well, Chris and Helga and Tony. It's been a long and winding road to get to this point. I think this is the third meeting, and we've had multiple DRPs and things along the way, lots of community advertising, but we're finally here. And I wanted to acknowledge the city's thorough assessment and also the positive recommendation for approval, which we really appreciate. This proposal has been designed to meet the specific disability and care needs of Tony and her family. While technically it's 2 multiple dwellings, it will operate as a single specialised family home with on-site carers, and it's not a commercial or high-intensity development. Given my limited time, I was going to focus on the 3 conditions that we identified in our memo, which we've received and devoured. So that was the condition relating to public art, the Section 70A notification, and the EV charging requirement. Onto the public art condition, there's 2 reasons why this condition has been applied in the first place. The first is the fact that these are technically multiple dwellings. The second is the cost, the construction value. The city's public art policy is clearly directed towards larger, higher intensity and more commercialised developments that increase activity and materially contribute to the public realm. And we don't believe the policy was ever intended to catch a development such as this one. In this case, the proposal is just 2 dwellings operating as a single household. There's no commercial component, there's no public spaces, there's no meaningful increase in activity beyond what would be expected from a large single dwelling or perhaps 2 group dwellings. If this proposal were for 2 dwellings side by side rather than one on top of the other, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Importantly, the elevated construction cost, which is the second trigger for this condition, is driven by the specialised disability supportive design of the home, not by increased yield or development intensity. In that context, a contribution in the order of $46,000 is not proportionate to any planning impact that this development might have. We say that there are clear and cogent reasons for the DAP to vary this policy requirement, and we request that this condition is deleted, please. Under the Section 70A condition, it's pretty straightforward. We support the substance of the condition. Our request only relates to the timing of it. It's a use-related control, so the logical trigger to satisfy that condition should be prior to occupation or prior to commencement of use, not prior to lodging a building permit. We would essentially be encumbering a development that doesn't yet exist. So we just ask that the DAP consider the timing of that. I just realised we didn't have our slides up, but I don't think really matters because it just explains what I'm saying anyway. The third and final condition that we raised was to do with the EV charging. There's a requirement for one charging point for each parking bay. We're supportive of the provision of EV infrastructure, but we believe that the requirement for a separate outlet for all 8 parking bays is excessive in this instance and simply adds additional cost to an already very expensive development. This requirement arises from the deemed to comply criteria under the city's local planning policy LP01. However, as the panel is aware, these provisions are not mandatory. They're deemed to comply provisions and can be varied where appropriate. Here, the development functions as a single household, already provides double the required number of parking bays and includes vehicle types that will not and cannot be plugged in. EV infrastructure can also be shared across more than one parking bay, as is common in many developments. In that context, requiring 8 separate outlets doesn't reflect the actual demand or use of the site, and we therefore request that this be reduced to a minimum of 2 outlets for the entire development, which is 1 per dwelling. In summary, this is a highly specialised, non-commercial development that delivers important social benefit, and most importantly, it delivers peace of mind for Tony and her parents. We really appreciate the city's support, and we look forward to MIDAP's deliberation on these 3 conditions. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Cameron. Questions of the presenter? Yes, Member Hyde.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation and the information you've submitted. If I could just ask you on that EV charging, presumably at any point in the future, if the current or proposed occupants or anybody else for that matter wanted to add new charging points, they could do so because the conduit, the cabling's there. So it doesn't need to be stipulated at this point how many outlets are required.
I've just recently added one in at my house retrospectively, so.
Okay, the provision is there should it be needed. Okay, thank you for that. Nothing further.
Thank you. Any further questions of the presenter? Oh, sorry, Councillor Kunze.
Thank you, Chair, and through you, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to ask, with regard to the ongoing concerns from the city with the placement of the bin pad and the footpath on 2nd Ave, were your comments on why those weren't resolved?
They're not fully resolved, but it's subject to a separate approval process with the technical services and the city's asset team at building permit stage. So the idea is that we're going to keep working with the city to resolve that as we go. The slope of the site does make some of these things quite complex to resolve, and it's only once we've got that next level of detail in the design that we can address it properly.
Thank you.
Questions? No, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen.
Right, thank you very much.
We'll move to officers. All right, there we are. Gentlemen, there's no need to make a full presentation, but are there any particular points you wanted to make in relation to the requested changes to the conditions packs?
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I won't go through a summary, but just will speak specifically to those 3 condition settings. So in relation to the public art condition, condition 22, within the policy, so within LP09 developer funded public art, there's clauses 6 and clause 3, clause 2 and clause 3. The policy statement outlines how the policy is to apply and where the public art contribution applies, which includes multiple dwellings exceeding 4 million. Now, there is greater flexibility in that sense from the outset because most local planning policies in different local governments are treated at $2 million. Obviously, this development is for $2 million, for over $4 million for 2 multiple dwellings, so the policy does apply in that sense. Through discussions with the applicant, a large part of the discussion has been regarding the land use, and in those discussions with the applicant, it was agreed on the applicant side that it would be for 2 multiple dwellings and not to be for a single house. Now, in regards to where the stated intent of the LP09 developer funded public art policy, The stated intent is outlined in the policy objectives themselves. Those policy objectives speak to improving the attractiveness and functionality of the city's built environment, develop and promote community identity within the city, and creating local landmarks. So the city believes that this proposal would be in line with those objectives within the policy. More broadly, the city considers that the proposal has an opportunity to provide significant community benefit via the provision of public art on site, given its location adjacent to the river foreshore, located within a high-quality shared path area in the Perth bicycle network in front of the site. The foreshore reserve in front of the site is a high-traffic route for pedestrians and tourists and has strong opportunity for community benefit. Noting that multiple dwellings are not commonly located in this subject area within the residential R20 area, public art would assist in differentiating the proposal from its surrounding development context. So the city considers that it's insufficient grounds to depart from the requirements of the policy and as such retains its position on condition 22. In regards to condition 24, the section 70A notification, the city would have no opposition to this changeover timing, should the DAP feel it appropriate. In regards to the EV charges, so condition 13, the condition seeks itself only to upgrade the power outlets within the garage to 15 amp power outlets. So just to be clear, it's not seeking a separate EV charger. We note that provision for EV chargers is shown in 2 locations on the proposed plans in the Undercroft garage. Those are on the south and then the eastern side. So in order to meet the requirements of the policy and that condition setting, the applicant would only need to provide 3 power points in the eastern portion of the garage, 4 in the southern portion and 1 on the western portion to align with those car parking bays.
Thank you for that. Questions of the officers? Yes, member Hyde.
Getting a new name. Could you please explain to me the relevance of condition 24? I know that you said that you didn't have any issue with the applicant's request to rewording, but I'm actually asking, why is that condition relating to section 70A on title required, given that this approval runs with the land anyway, and it is associated with the approved plans. The approved plans are for 2 dwellings. So if any other development or whatever was to be required at some point in the future, that would be a new development application, which is the right and proper process for things to go through. So could I have your comment, please, on the relevance of condition 24 in that context?
Thank you for the question. The relevance of the condition is purely a notification. It's purely a notification on the title to notify future owners of the property on the subject site. So the city, obviously there's a lot of history in this application and the intent of the owners is obviously a relevant consideration, but the city's only dealing with land use on the site. So land use would be for 2 multiple dwellings. The intent of the notification is to advise future owners that the development will only be used for 2 multiple dwellings.
Okay, thank you. Another question, please. Condition 4, would that normally have to the satisfaction of the city? Was all the others seem to? Was there a reason that didn't?
No reason, so that could be updated to the satisfaction of the city.
Lovely, thank you. And then condition 19. Would that be better placed as an advice note, or is there a reason that that needs to be a statutory condition?
Sorry, could I just clarify, just cut out, was that condition 19?
Yes, 19, yes.
So the reason that was included is just in regards to the works in the verge proposed by the applicant, just so it's more to just notify the applicant, so it could be converted to an advice note.
Okay, lovely, thank you, because they're required to do a separate application. Is that right, for the verge anyway? So, okay, thank you. Yeah, that was all I had. Thank you.
Further questions?
Just on that power outlet, the condition sort of refers to power outlet for electric vehicle charging infrastructure. But what you're not requiring is that infrastructure. You're just asking for a power outlet. Correct?
That's correct. So it's just a power outlet, and that's in accordance with that policy LPO.
It was a minimum of 3 now, was it?
No, so it's 1 per car parking bay. So it just works on the basis of the car parking bay proposed as part of the application. In this case, there would be 8.
They could share. 2 cars could share one, couldn't they?
The policy itself so stipulates that it's 1 per car parking bay. So 1 power outlet per car parking bay.
Right, thank you.
And it is, sorry, and just to add, so it is just the power outlet to confirm, it's not the EV charging facility itself.
Thank you. Further questions from panel members? Yes, Councillor Kunzel.
Thank you. Through the chair, just with respect to the landscaping, condition 17 provides approval for the landscaping and requests that it be established prior to the development. Within the documents, you've got the landscape plan as well as the concept plan, and then condition 21 outlines that the landscaping works within the verge are not approved of the application, I presume due to the issues that need to be gone through. I was just wondering what the prompt is. Like the last item we dealt with requested a verge garden plan. What's the prompt for dealing with the verge, given that it's part of the approved plan, but then there's a condition saying it's not approved?
Yeah, so thank you for the question. So the approval will deal with only the works on the site. There is a separate approval process for land and verge landscape treatments that the applicant will need to go through in order to resolve those issues regarding the works on the verge in front of the site. So that's usually dealt with separately as a sort of a technical work through that we work through the building permit stage with the applicant, but not part of the DA.
Thank you. Just to clarify though, the previous item requested a verge garden plan, but this one, it doesn't get dealt with through the DAP process. Is there a reason for the disparity?
Thank you for the question. The reason that it was included on the previous application is because the applicant proposed some additional landscaping works. There were also works within the verge in regards to car parking bays proposed, which, if approved, would be a consideration of the DA application. Now, this doesn't include those works at all, so there aren't any on-street bays or embayments or anything like that. So any works within the verge in terms of landscaping, etc., would just be dealt with as a separate item.
Thank you. No further questions? No. All right, we'll move to the item. I'm going to seek a mover and a seconder for the recommendation for approval with conditions as printed currently. Yeah, Hall, thank you. And a seconder. Thank you, Member Hyde. Mayor Hall.
I've got his sound on.
Haven't got your sound on, Mayor Hall.
That works. Thank you, Chair, for pointing that out. I'm happy to support the recommendation to approve the application, subject, of course, to any later amendments by other members. I've had a careful look at this. There's been a history of this application through this panel. I'm very pleased to see where it has actually landed. Councillor Kunzer and I both know the site very well. I do take on board the applicant's comments in relation to public art. I won't be intending to move an amendment, though I might support it if that is actually made for the reasons outlined by the applicant. I'm not certain that we ever intended in that policy to be foisting private property rights onto private properties and forcing them to invest in this. I'd much rather that money was spent on high quality build and high quality landscaping for that site. But that aside, it is an iconic landmark. I think the build itself, a clever design. They've taken into account much of, if not all the recommended advice from the design review panel and the city itself. And I think that the quality of this development will in time influence future building along Riverton Drive, much of which has been built through the 1960s and 70s and is now starting to be redeveloped. I think it's good for the area. I think the design is clever. I support it in its current iteration. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Member Hyde.
Thank you. I too am happy to support this. I'm very pleased that we've got to this state. Such a relief, isn't it, to have got to this point? You know, obviously it's achieved a good standard of design across 7 of the 10 principles. Interesting the previous application did too. But I think this is a high quality of design. And I think it's obviously much needed. I think it fits the local area quite well. There are some other fairly large properties in the area, so this is not out of keeping with some of those, albeit classified as 2 multiple dwellings. And I'm quite comfortable with that definition of multiple dwellings as the RAR has so carefully outlined to us that it can be accepted. With that said, presiding member, I'd like to make a number of amendments, if I may. I'll take the easy ones first. That is for condition 4 to add the words "to the satisfaction of the city."
Okay, is there a second for that? Thank you.
Just to be consistent with all the others and to clarify who the clearing authority is.
Okay, any further speakers on that? No, I'll put that amendment. All in favour? Unanimous, thank you.
Thank you. Amendment 2 would be to move condition 19 to an advice note and renumber the conditions accordingly.
Thank you. Seconder for that? Member Howe, thank you.
Thank you. This relates to matters of the verge treatment and is, as we know, subject to another approval process, and the city officers have not raised any objection to this being moved to an advance note.
Further speakers? I'll put that amendment. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Amendment 3 would be to delete condition 22 relating to public art.
Okay, is there a second for that? Yes, Member Howe, thank you.
I concur with the Mayor on this, that I think this public art policy, which does allow for discretion, that discretion would be applicable here. It is a small scale development. It is predominantly in a residential precinct, and I acknowledge the officers highlighting to us that it is a relatively high trafficked area, but I don't think that this is a reasonable imposition on a 2-dwelling development. And if it were any other form than multiple, it would not be applying. So I'm very comfortable to delete that.
Member Howe, seconder.
Nothing to add, thank you.
Further speakers on that amendment? Yes, Councillor Kunza.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I support the amendment. I appreciate why the city officers have implemented the condition and then their defence of it. However, as the mover mentioned, I don't believe that, I guess, it should be imposed on a 2 multiple dwelling development. It's whilst it is in a highly trafficked area, there's, as been mentioned through the report, there's many high lemon centre gum trees. There's lots of things that provide great amenity to that area, and I don't think public art is needed to improve it, nor do I think that we should be imposing it on a 2 multiple dwelling project. So that's why we'll be supporting the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Kunza. Further speakers? No? All right. So I'll wrap up the debate. I'll put that amendment to delete the condition 22. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you. Further amendment, please. Amendment 4 would be to delete condition 24 and renumber the sequential conditions. That relates to 70A.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Yes, Member Howe, thank you.
I think, as I raised in question time, my view is that this is actually not needed as a memorial on title, because we have before us an application for 2 multiple dwellings. The approval relates to those plans. That approval runs with the land effectively. Therefore, that moratorium on further development or subdivision is in place unless another development application comes forward at whatever time in the future and within what other planning framework may exist at that time. So I think it's a duplication which is actually not needed. It doesn't really have a place. I think these section 70A memorials are there to identify hazards and matters of annoyance and, you know, things like that rather than this.
Thank you.
No, nothing further to add. Thank you.
Further speakers on that amendment? No, I support the amendment. I agree. There's a proper process or planning process that you would normally go through. We wouldn't see a section 70A put on a warehouse development to say this is a warehouse and nothing else. So again, it's about allowing proper processes to take place. So I support the amendment to delete it. Back to you. No. Okay, I'll put the amendment. All in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Still with you.
Thank you. I note the applicant wants to revise condition 13. Frankly, I don't understand it, so I'm happy to leave that to anybody else that understands electric vehicles and what is required. So I'm happy to leave speaking at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, further speakers on the matter? No. Yes, Councillor Quinzer.
I'll just speak in favour of the recommendation as amended. I'm delighted that we've got to this stage where both the city and the applicant has resolved any issues, and that we're in a position where we're able to approve the development. I know that the family is very much looking forward to getting this development built, and so I commend everyone that's participated in getting to this point. I've got nothing to add. I think the built form is impeccable. It along with the landscaping will suit the riverfront and that area of Rossmoyne impeccably, and I support the recommendation.
Thank you. Look, I too support the application. It's been a long road, but I think we're here nearly. The RAR provides good documentation and well-reasoned arguments. I accept that it's only 2 dwellings, and I agree that there's no need for that section 70A. I want to just make a couple of amendments. One is a minor one to condition 6. On the 3rd last line, it talks about council specifications that in my view should be city specifications. So I'm going to seek a second of it. Okay, that's seconded by Member Hyde. I don't think there's any need for me to speak further on that. Any speakers? Yes, Mayor Hall.
Just by way of clarification, though, I would probably, Chair, urge you to always use City of Canning. The city is not an entity. City is a city. The City of Canning is the entity. So perhaps we should use the word City of Canning.
Happy with that, to make it City of Canning.
Yes, me too.
All right. Okay, no further speakers. I'll put that amendment. All in favour? That's carried unanimously. And now with condition 13, I agree with Member Hyde. I'm not quite sure. I'm wondering if this amendment might work. talks about a power outlet for electric vehicles charging infrastructure with a minimum of 15 amp is to be provided to enable access to each parking space. So in other words, it might be, it's not one for each parking space, but it might be 3 or 2 or 3, whatever. And as long as it's accessible to each of the parking bays. So I'm going to add those, suggest adding those words after provided to enable access to each car parking space. Is there a seconder for that? Thank you. Are there any speakers you wish to speak on that?
No, I think the city is trying to meet the halfway with this, along with the applicant, and not say that EV infrastructure needs to be provided to every bay. It's just saying it needs to have power of a sufficient amperage to enable someone to put that in later, or just to charge directly from the cars. And I think your amendment, as you spoke to, enables that to happen.
Okay, thank you. Further speakers? No? All right, I will put that amendment. All in favour? It's unanimous, thank you. So that, I'll go back to Mayor Hall being the mover. Wind up the debate.
Thank you. I commend the recommendation as amended. Thank you, Speaker.
Okay, I'll put that. All in favour? Unanimously, thank you very much. So moving on, there's no Form 2 applications, no Section 31. In other business, the SAT applications are listed on the website, and I'll close the meeting at 11:23. Thank you all the members. Thank you to the presenters, thank you to the staff, and thank you to the support staff here. Thank you. Catch you later.
Thank you, Chair.